Hello, friends. Um, Today, we're looking at another problematic book. This is Blueloon by Julia Cook. If you've read my post and collection about talking to kids about shootings, you may have seen some rants that I have done against Julia Cook's books. This is a case of really great intentions and filling a gap in what we need in terms of children's literature, but done extremely poorly. So if you're familiar with Julia Cook, you might have seen her books like Boosted on Amazon and things like that. She churns out oodles and oodles and oodles of books without doing the research on them fully. I think she just like connects with one professional, throws out a book, and then doesn't really refine it or test it with kids or think about the implications about feeding into stereotypes and things like that. So her books are just intensely sloppy, like the sloppiest books I have ever seen. There's no quality control on them, and it's really about quantity and people assuming that all children's book, as long as it's about a topic, can be a good thing. But it's an example of childism and ageism, just assuming that kids will accept and deserve lower quality literature, and it's basically like giving them junk, like Happy Meal toys, and expecting that to do. So today we're looking at Blueloon, which is about bipolar disorder. Or actually it doesn't really ever say that it's about bipolar disorder. I'm just assuming because she's just too freaking lazy to address what they're actually talking about. So this balloon is sad and mopey, and imagine getting this for your kid who has bipolar disorder, and seeing like, hey buddy, this is you. Like, the imagery here is a little bit messed up. Like, there have been books where she's put people's parents in a wood chipper. Not thinking at all. Okay. So I'm supposed to be a regular balloon, but I'm just not having fun like the others. I'm kind of dull. I'm kind of flat. My string is tied up in knots. Identifying as dull as flat, as opposed to I'm feeling something. And this speaks to, I don't always agree with this, but a lot of people like to focus on human protagonists so that way kids kids can actually see themselves reflected, as opposed to doing the mental gymnastics of jumping into like, oh, this is a balloon and this is what this means if the balloon was human. In this case, this is a really good example of why we should be using human protagonists and things like that. Couching this in a metaphor of balloon tells kids that there's, it kind of implies that there's a stigma behind it, which there is a stigma behind it, and that it's just too much for kids to see a human with bipolar disorder because that would be somehow shameful. So by couching it into this metaphor of bipolar disorder as you are a balloon and this is how you're feeling up and down in knots and things like that, it just forces kids to go through mental gymnastics that are just not necessary. It's ableist for literal thinking kids who can't really do those metaphor connections, and it's shamey, and it's a little gross, and it's ableist. So anyway, this balloon, sad sack. And then it says, like, I used to feel bright and happy and stuff like that, which if you've ever had a depressive episode or you've ever had extreme anxiety, that's not really, for me at least, the way that it works. You're not really thinking about the way things used to be because your brain is still clouded with kind of a skewed perspective or skewed perception. So while they might have memories of like things used to be okay and I didn't always used to be like this, it's more of just like very present into I feel terrible now and things have always been terrible. I just didn't realize that things will always be terrible. And that's kind of the really dangerous thing about depressive episodes, is that feeling like you are stuck now and you will always be stuck. Which makes me wonder, did she actually speak to anyone who has had these episodes? And I should stop here to also point out that I am not bipolar, so this is, I'm probably missing a lot of things in terms of an own voice's perspective. I do have OCPD, which is not OCD. It's a personality disorder that causes things like that, and I also have anxiety. But it's enough that you can kind of, I haven't done a lot of research in the mad rights movement in terms of mental health conditions, but the movement towards progressiveness is accepting how you are and not seeing yourself as broken, which this very much looks like a broken balloon, and this feeds into that narrative that anyone with a mental health condition is lesser or not ideal the way they are, and they really need to work on getting to the end of the book where magic cures, and this is really the only way to exist, and if you don't get from here to here, you're failing, right? So what do books like this, that if you, the only book you can find about bipolar disorder is this, as opposed to like, you're okay, and it's okay to be the way you are, let's move with what you have, and obviously try and make you feel better if possible, and give you tools, but the objective is not to change you or to call you broken, if that makes sense. Okay, so you got this sad sack balloon surrounded by happy, perfect balloons, and that balloon wants to be more like the perfect balloons because of ableism. And then you have a manic episode. Lydia Brown has a fantastic post about ableist language, which I can link to in the notes, but uses like crazy days and language. It stigmatizes and uses crazy as a pejorative. Again, not helpful. This is a manic episode. Why not just call it a manic episode? Why do we have to tiptoe around it? Is because Cook feels like manic, depressive, words like that are stigmatized. They're bad, right? So they don't want to call it manic. Why not just call it what it is? Why call it crazy days and balloony toony and like make kids do those gymnastics? So then you have the microaggressions, snap out of it, things like that, trying to be a little bit validating. Not pointing out how stuff like that kind of makes you feel worse. They're trying to be validating. They're not taking it quite far enough. And then you've got this wise rock psychologist, and just the metaphors are so ridiculous. So basically the rock tells the balloon, you look like crap, over and over, repeatedly in the book. I understand why you're depressed and why you feel so sad. Just hide under me for a little while and then you won't feel so bad. So this psychologist is saying, hide under a rock for 15 minutes and then that'll make you feel better. What happens if you hide underneath a rock for 15 minutes and you don't feel better? How are kids going to read this if it doesn't magically work? Is that going to make them feel better? No, it's just going to make them feel like they're more broken. And then 15 minutes later, the rock ejects the balloon saying, you can't stay here anymore. I don't know, maybe that's some cognitive behavior therapy that I have not heard of. I feel like they just added that in there. So the idea, again, they're couching under this metaphor of hiding underneath your psychologist. Why not make them humans taking a 15-minute break, right? Basically, and then this rock's like, I can fix you. And the balloon's like, well, what can I do? Well, said the rock, in a nice vague thing, you can start by deciding that you want to change. Do you? Which feeds into this narrative that if you're depressed, if you have a mental health condition, if you're disabled, you're just not trying hard enough. And just like, if you're infertile, you're just not, you don't want that baby enough. If your brain is not the way you want it to be, you must not want it bad enough. You must not be praying hard enough. Why don't they think before they put stuff like this? And of course it's vague. There's no tangible example of what it means to believe in yourself, to be yourself. Those platitudes that are really easy to say and sound really nice until you're like, what the hell does that mean? And one other thing is your pragmatic language, when you are in this kind of condition, dips down. So, obviously I'm autistic. I have some problems with pragmatic language, but most people who are going to be in this headspace, they're not going to be able to be, your creativity damps down. So how are you going to make those connections between believing in yourself and what you actually need to do? You can't, and it's unfair, and it's ableist to just be like, oh, believe in yourself. And the first step is you have to want it hard enough. So want it hard enough, go see the balloon doctor. And then yes, I would give anything to have things go back to the way they used to be, I said. Well then, you have to learn to believe in yourself. Again, I would give anything to be like other people, not be broken, as opposed to I'm okay the way I am and then start from that foundation. This is a very dangerous foundation to start from, is you're broken and you need to be fixed. That's not going to make you less depressed. And then the balloon goes to a doctor who gives the balloon a prescription for fresh air because apparently, again, couching in metaphors, the idea of taking medication is so stigmatized and so shameful that they have to couch it as a fresh air metaphor. Just say, I'm taking medication because that's for my health, the same way you would take antibiotics if you have, an infection. Got my prescription filled. Oh, you are looking much better, the rock said to me, and you don't have dents anymore. So this focus on physicality. So, and then you're going to hear this from a lot of people who have anxiety, who have depression, and they're going through these. The expectation is if you look okay, then you're okay. And this pressure to look okay on the outside. Now, this rock would this rock be giving the balloon help if the balloon was, I hate to use the label high functioning, but if the balloon looked happy and was bright and shiny and didn't have knots, there's that stigma of the the high functioning person with depression. They also need just as much help as someone who can't mask it. Let's work on the knots in your string first of all. Take this pen and paper and write all the things that make you feel sad inside and the things that have messed up your life. So externalizing like something else must have caused it, and like, do you really understand how depression works? Because it's not quite like that. But again, this idea, they're giving tools and then they're looking better. So every time a kid tries one of these tools, if they don't feel better, how is that going to make the actual physical children who are reading this book? And then we get into a pie metaphor for basically executive functioning problems, and like just there's so many metaphors in here and it is so confusing and it is so freaking sloppy. And then it starts exercising and stuff like that. There's no tip on like how to start that. It's just like do these, break it up and then do these, and then you're feeling better, because if you don't do these, you just don't want it hard enough. It's not because there's actually something that you need help with your brain. And then there's the magical cure, of course, because we're at the end of the book, and how can we possibly accept that sometimes, like the balloon, sometimes this doesn't work and you need to just keep moving. Yeah, so that is an example of a Julia cookbook. So sloppy, so insulting, and so poorly done. Anyway, that was my rant about Julia Cook's Blueloon. Bye-bye.